Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. My guest today is Saurabh Mithal. Welcome, Saurabh. How are you?
Welcome. Thank you, Craig. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk to you.
I'm I'm normally pretty darn excited, but I'm downright giddy because we keep having horrible problems with technology. This is our, I don't know, second attempt to actually schedule this thing, and then the best one was the day the power went out. You're saying I'm from the middle of a call, all of a sudden it gets dark on the other side of my call. I'm like, well, I guess that's the end of that. So we'll see how far we get today.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, since we've had like three conversations now, we keep coming back to the idea of I'm going to say using podcasting to expand our network. And I don't mean like skeevy networking, here's my business card, but the
Mhm.
idea of simply having conversations with other people without having a particular goal in mind. And I'm wondering, is that something that you saw as a possibility for podcasting when you like really started thinking about podcasting, or has your thinking about podcasting evolved to bring you to that idea?
Uh, I actually I'll just share a bit. I have a program called Career Design, which
Hmm.
came about in the COVID crisis because there was such gloomy atmosphere in the initial months, and I was wondering of what kind of careers would thrive in this situation because there was so much gloomy stuff, economy is going down, this is happening, that is happening. And a model that came to my mind when I was thinking was that of an anti-fragile career, and how can we design an anti-fragile career. And there were different components to it, like how can we consistently create so that we are creating value, how can we ship, we can making shipping a habit, how can we consistently learn deliberately. And then there was this component of connecting with people, because if you do the first three but you're doing it all alone,
Hmm.
then it's not a career, then it's a hobby,
Right.
right? So when I thought of how do we grow our connections consistently, podcasting for me seemed like a very is a much more enabling platform than asking someone for a cup of coffee. Like
Right.
and it allows you to go deep into conversations because it's a more exploratory kind of a medium.
Hmm.
So I really like podcasting as a potential toolkit in your career design, in your career expansion. And even if we talk about non-professional life, just having a podcast about your hobbies can create a platform for you to connect with different people with whom you share those hobbies. And you can become the instigator, as Seth keeps saying, you can become the impresario of that community, and you can have very unique hobbies on which you can start different podcasts and just indulge in those shared experiences. So I really like podcasting as a means to grow, to like develop this growth mindset towards life in general. So yeah,
Hmm.
I really like podcasting as a medium.
There's an interesting piece in there about, so sometimes podcasters talk about what is the magic, why is audio so great, but there's a piece of magic that happens when two people have a conversation and we know that we're trying to make a thing together. It's almost like if we were to like paint, but we knew that nobody was ever supposed to see the painting. It's like, yeah, well, we just kind of like screw around. But because you and I know that, I mean, people aren't listening at this instant, but we know people theoretically will be listening. It causes us. This is my thoughts. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. It causes us to think about: is this worth saying out loud? Is this worth taking up 2 seconds of Saurabh and everybody else's time? And I just think there's that additional piece of magic. Like the conversations that you have spontaneously on the street, they don't have that same bit of magic in there. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, first of all, you're nodding, so I'm guessing you agree. But is there is there more to it than that, or is it really as simple as knowing that people are listening forces us to think more about what we choose to say out loud, or
Yeah, yeah, that is ingrained in us from, I think, the time when we were in the hunter gatherer
Hmm.
mode. Like, we care what the tribe thinks of us. So whenever things are just in private, in like, if we look at it, right, whenever thoughts are in our head, they're kind of unfiltered. But when
Hmm.
we are saying something to someone, then we are like, okay, what? And now I think with the recording part, it's not just that okay, someone will listen to it this week. It would be like, this goes on my permanent record.
Right. The
And like
long
20
tail, right?
years from now,
The infinite
someone
shelf,
might,
right?
I heard that
Mm.
recording. But it actually, you're quite right, it increases the quality of the interaction. We are much more engaged, much more thoughtful, much more aware of what we are saying. And that really increases the quality of our, like, the participants, like yours and mine interaction, as well as for anyone who is listening to the podcast. So I think that's a how we are being generous in that sense, like we are
Mm.
creating value all
Yes.
around for that.
That's a good word for it. On
Yeah,
my best days, generous, yes, is a good word for it. I
yeah.
think the idea of like, I love the thought about, what is the tribe? Like, it's ingrained to think about the tribe's opinion or what the tribe thinks of us. And I was thinking just now about, I'm going to say through line or the thread that we're on. So I don't know about you, but I find I'm always thinking, all right, if I say, X, that's kind of in line with what we're discussing. But if I say Y, yeah, that's funny, but it's going to lead us away
Yeah,
from the thoroughfare. And that's also a way that it increases the quality of our interaction because I'm less likely, one is less likely to go off on random, self-aggrandizing diatribes.
yeah.
So I'm wondering how do we take the things that like you and I are learning as podcasters here, like, we're kind of like navel gazing, right?
Hmm.
How do we take these things and share them with others beyond the platform? Like how can we not just do better ourselves in random conversations that aren't recorded, but how can we help other people see that it would be better if they did more of these types of things in those conversations, if that makes sense?
Yeah, like I think the best way to inspire anyone is through example.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
just
I would
by
agree.
having the conversation, we enable the other person to take our example and do it. And I think that is the best way to teach anything or uh, help anyone. I like one thing that is coming to my mind with regards to the conversation we are having is in the creatives workshop at Akimbo, Seth asks us to do dailies.
Hmm.
And I had been doing the morning pages, the private morning pages for a while, where I would sit for half an hour and
Right.
just write whatever comes to my mind. And I shifted from morning pages to dailies, and I saw the texture of my writing change, the texture of the
Ooh.
content change. It was much more aware, it was much more empathetic to the reader, that somebody would read it, and the quality of my writing went up. The morning pages went in cycles, the dailies went forward.
Hmm.
So because the dailies were in the public site, although it was a like very selected
Yeah, it's a
cohort,
closed community, but
closed
it's
cohort,
it's
but it's
people you
still,
don't know, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Even with people I know, like I have a system set up with my own students, but when I'm writing dailies, the texture is different. So
Mm.
both the morning pages have their own utility for me, because they help me just take the trash out, like just empty my brain.
I know what you mean,
And
right?
yeah, and that is also very important, because otherwise it starts accumulating. So yeah.
I talk about my head being a snow globe, the glass thing with the floating, and it's like all shaken up, and there's a million little things in there. It's like
Yeah,
morning pages is like the tap, drain the snow out on the side. I know what you
yeah,
mean. I'm interested in the word texture, your use of the word texture to talk
yeah,
about the difference between morning pages. And as much as I don't love this question, can you tell me more about what you mean by texture? Because that really interests me. The idea of like, what is it? Because I don't know. That's different between what you were producing via morning pages type of practice and when you were producing as a daily or a shipped practice.
yeah. I think it's kind of like how if you're at home and you would like wear any t-shirt or any shorts and just relax versus you're going to a meeting where you're going to meet 20 people and you're like, no, I need to be well dressed. So
Hmm.
you're wearing clothes in both the places, but the texture of the clothes and your thought texture of your thoughts regarding the clothes have changed significantly, and you're being much more mindful when you're going out, whether it's a party, whether it's a business meeting, whether it's just a casual hangout, but you're being very mindful over what you're wearing. Whereas when you're alone and you're not expecting anyone, you're like, yeah, I don't care that much,
All right.
yeah, this is happening. So I think that texture changes when we move from private, no one is going to see this, to a semi public or a public kind of
Space.
exposure.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
Not that I'm self conscious, but I'm wearing t shirts. But I will say, I actually have, although they all look the same, I think
it's a
I have,
very nice
I,
t-shirt, Craig.
I
It's
have
like,
different. I have different sets of t-shirts. I have like
yeah,
one whole set of t-shirts that I use when I can be seen on video calls. And I
yeah,
actually considered switching to collared shirts, but I noticed that most of the people that I'm talking to aren't having. So I was like, I do it intentionally, but I do have different shirts. They actually feel a little different. They're a little more
yeah,
expensive, and I sit
exactly.
differently. And I was like, oh wow, you're calling me out on all these things that I actually am doing because these episodes. It's such a stripped down, minimum viable podcast.
Yeah,
They're almost like dailies. I would do them daily if I could. It's
yeah,
just a matter of getting people to schedule in. But yeah, I think that's a great point you make about awareness and unpacking and being mindful.
yeah,
What else springs to mind around? I'm glad that I'm kind of excited. I'm glad we got to the morning pages because that reminded me we talked about that once before. Like I think in our previous call a month ago, we were talking about morning pages and dailies, and I would have never thought to bring that back up.
yeah,
Um, I'm torn between saying, so first of all, where in the world are you? Because I know where you are, but nobody else does.
yeah. I'm in New Delhi, India, and so I'll tell a few things so that people who want to connect with me can connect.
Oh,
So
that's great. Yes.
yeah, I have an organization called Passionately Curious, and the basic idea is to help individuals become more self-aware and then build a career centered around their individuality. So that is what the core of my work looks like, to help people do that, design and build a career centered around their individuality. And so they can check more of it at passionatelycurious.in. So same spelling,
Mm,
passionatelycurious.in. And yeah, there is a link to connect with me one on one. So if anyone wants to just have a discussion, there's a Calendly link there, so they can connect with me there. And yeah,
cool.
that would be a good way to reach me.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm also wondering. Um, so for me in my personal life, I don't randomly run into a lot of people, not because I avoid them, but just based on where I live. There isn't like, and it's how our society is kind of wired these days. But I do run into people a lot, but it's like people in my neighborhood, like I know them well, or it's my cousin or my mom or whatever. Do you find that you encounter a lot of new people, like maybe new students when the semester changes, and how does that? Do you find any cycles? Let me make an actual question out of this for you.
Mhm.
Do you find that there are cycles in your creative work based on the cycles in your exposure to new people?
Yeah, yeah. So I think I'll just share what I've realized is in the last 2 years, especially, is like two particular communities that I'm in. engaging with a lot. One is the Akimbo community, the one that Seth Godin has set up. So different
Hmm.
people have connected through the Akimbo. Actually, I actually got to know you about you also through that community only. So that is one. And the second is the passionately curious community, which is what I have set up. So helping those students learn about generosity and empathy and all those things. The the exposure to new people for me is like there are multiple channels. One is where I have to grow my own work. So how do I generate new leads? How do I reach out to more people? How so I do a lot of open workshops where
Hmm.
new students can come in and we can have a discussion, and if it makes sense then we can take it forward. There are also one thing that I'm taking inspiration from you is how can I make this a habit of interviewing people, maybe a daily habit or a weekly schedule where I'm just whoever I'm meeting, I'm just having this conversation, because a lot of time I'm in different meetings but I have not built that connect with them, and it
Hmm.
it just hardly takes a 30 minute or 45 minutes call to really connect as a human being. So yeah, these are the different avenues I'm thinking of exploring in order to connect with different new people.
I, again, I like how mindful you are about that. That's a great. I mean, I'm mindful about a lot of things, but sometimes I'm on autopilot. So I like that you're mindful about the different spaces that you're in and the different types of people that you encounter. Um, let's want to do some random stuff. How about what's something that people get wrong about you? Do you think?
So yeah, I'll try to answer this. This is a tricky question, but
It's
so
hard.
what?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not like I will call people out on their BS. Like
Hmm.
I will, when they come and say rationalize that they are doing this stuff while they should be doing that stuff, and that stuff matters to them more than this stuff, but they are like, no, but I have to do this stuff so that I can go to that stuff. I am the one who will call them out. I am the one who will like, this is all BS. Go do that. This is, and so a lot of time people misunderstand. They think that I am like I am judging them on their situation, or I'm like not understanding them. Whereas what I feel is if I don't tell them, then maybe no one else will.
Hmm.
Like if I don't tell them to write that book right now and not wait another 10 years until the cows come home, I don't
Right.
think they have anybody else who will do that for them. And so yeah, a lot of people try, they are not running away from me, they try to run away from themselves, and in the process they run away from me, because they know that if they are talking to me, then I'm not going to validate their
Hmm.
like rationalizations, or I'm not going to say yeah me too, because I don't like
Hmm.
I want someone to keep me on the hook, and I want people to be on the hook. So yeah, that is something that a lot of people don't understand.
Uh, yeah, I think that's a great thing to do, though. I think what you're doing is a great way to be compassionate, and also, quite honestly, it means you're really curious if you're aware enough to know what they should be working on.
Yeah.
Being mindful of our time. I don't want to tempt fate by trying to go long and then having the call drop at the end. Is there, well, since I asked you a hard question, is there anything that you wanted to ask me that you haven't asked me yet?
um
Also, a
how
hard question, but
no, I really I have a question for you. So like you mentioned you are semi-retired, and how like I think financially you are like not worried about your day-to-day expenses or how you'll survive, and you're now doing work for fun, versus like when you would have started like way back in the day whenever you were telling me 90s. So how is it different, like doing the creative work then and doing the creative work now? Uh,
ooh, I and people are going like, "Wait, what?" And yeah, sorry, you missed the conversation where we discussed all that stuff. I would say that the big difference is I don't know whether I should say I didn't used to be creative or
Hmm.
whether I should say I didn't realize that I was being creative. I'm not quite sure
Hmm.
what the proper way to put it is. But now it's very clear to me that not everything, but all the stuff that I really enjoy is creative work. And I'm thinking that I probably was creative back, I'm going back 30 years. I probably
Hmm.
was creative, but because I didn't realize that, I probably wasn't, like, it was just random. Like I do a bunch of stuff and some of it was creative and I didn't really get it. So now here comes mindful again. I'm very mindful of what am I actually doing? And is this like the creative stuff that moves me toward my goal or that does
Yeah.
what I want to be accomplishing? And when I'm not being creative, like, all right, well, I have to vacuum too. I need to do laundry. That's not
Yeah.
creative, but that's what I'm doing today. Like, so now I think the biggest difference is the mindfulness about what kind of thing it is that I'm doing in any moment.
Yeah.
Because I've had trains of thought where I'm like, well, oh, I wasted a decade. You're like, well, actually, I'm not sure that I wasted a decade because I don't think I could have the same understanding today if I hadn't tried the things that I did.
Yeah.
I didn't like make mistakes and like burn things to the ground, but like
Yeah.
the the focus is so much different now for the kinds of things that I say yes to versus the kinds of things I say no thank you to. So
Yeah.
that's the thing that comes to mind first is about what of my time is creative now and being aware of that and
Yeah.
not having been aware of that before. That's the thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. And just one follow up question on that. What advice would you give to yourself when you were the predominant thought on your mind was how will I pay rent the next month or
Yeah, I got lots of great stories about sitting on milk crates and eating pizza and stuff.
yeah.
Um, I think it would be a long play. So I think there are things that I started learning about, like the ideas about like what do you really control, and thoughts that I've gotten from like reading about Zen and reading about meditation and all these
Mm.
things. I think what I would have said to myself would have been to try and sneak those ideas in sooner. So rather than waiting, till maybe all but 15 years ago, if I had found that stuff 30 years ago, like
Mhm.
maybe if I had taken some philosophy courses in college, I might have stumbled on those ideas sooner. But I'm pretty sure that the Craig of 30 years ago would not have taken any direct instruction from anybody, including Craig from the future with a time machine. So it would have had to have been some sort of like, you might be interested in reading this, like something esoteric slipped in so that I would discover things sooner. I think
Yeah.
that would be the only thing that would have actually worked. To literally how I would do that, I'm not sure. That would take a lot of thought, but
Yeah.
I think it would be like sort of like an end run on it.
That's really helpful, I think, because I interact mostly with young students who are in their 20s, and I think what I'm getting out of your advice is just explore. Like, don't limit yourself to what you're doing. Like,
Well, I think you're on the right track because your project is
yeah,
called Passionately Curious, and I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
that's it. Like there's a phrase like aren't if you're bored, it's because you're not curious, and if you're curious, sorry, there's no cure for that. Like once you're
yeah,
curious, it's a self-feeding cycle. So I think you're on the right
yeah,
track.
yeah. That's amazing.
All right.
Yeah,
I want to be mindful of your time. And I think that's a great place to stop. So, Saurabh, thanks for taking the time and particularly for like putting in the effort and being tenacious about getting on the call and helping me make this into a thing that actually exists in the world and helping me ship it. Thanks,
thank
Saurabh.
thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I just feel wonderful that I got to talk to you 3 times, even though we are shipping it only once. But it was really cool. Yeah.